The tribunal chamber of the Galactic Concordance had been built 10,000 years earlier to hold ceremonies of triumph. It was not designed for shame. Its high vaulted ceiling, its tiers of luminous seating, its great central floor where the light pooled, all of it had been made for victory, for the announcement of conquered worlds and absorbed peoples, for the long, bright history of an empire that had never once been required to answer for itself. On the day the witness for the dead rose to present the first exhibit, the chamber held more beings than it had ever held, and it had never been so quiet. They had come to watch the Concordance try its own high command. This had never happened before. In 10,000 years of expansion, the Concordance had absorbed 400 worlds, and not once had a single officer been called to account for how it was done, because the doing had always been clean, lawful, and, by the Concordance's own measure, merciful. The Concordance did not exterminate. It did not enslave. It absorbed. It arrived at a world. It demonstrated overwhelming superiority. It accepted the world's surrender, and it folded the conquered people into the vast machinery of the empire, where they were given a place, a function, a managed and peaceful existence. 400 times this had been done. 400 times it had worked. The invasion of Earth had also worked. That was not in dispute. The military objective had been achieved in 11 days. Earth had been demonstrated to, had failed to mount meaningful resistance, and had been absorbed. By every metric in the Concordance's long history, the invasion of Earth was a routine success. The High Command was not on trial for failing. The High Command was on trial because of what the witness for the dead had found afterward, in the ruins, in the data, in the recovered objects of a conquered world, and because that defector had refused to let it stay buried, and had brought it to the one chamber in the galaxy that could not, finally, look away. I am setting this account down as the chamber recorder, the neutral keeper of the tribunal's record. I did not expect to be changed by it. Recorders are not supposed to be changed. We are instruments. But I sat in that chamber through every exhibit, and I am no longer an instrument. And I have written this so that what assembled itself in that room cannot be unassembled by anyone who would prefer the Concordance's older, cleaner story. The witness for the dead presented the exhibits out of order. I have kept that order because the order is the argument, and the argument is the only justice the dead were ever going to receive. I want to describe the witness for the dead before the exhibits begin, because the chamber's first reaction was to dismiss it, and the dismissal is part of the record. The prosecutor was not an impressive figure. The Concordance breeds its officers tall and luminous, built to be looked at, and the witness was neither. It had served before its defection in the unglamorous middle ranks, a cataloger, an archivist of conquered things, the kind of officer who walks through the ruins after the battle and writes down what was found. Its own people considered the work beneath notice. You do not become powerful in the Concordance by cataloging the dead. You become powerful by making them. So when the witness rose to prosecute the High Command, the most decorated, most luminous beings the Empire had ever produced, the architects of 400 absorptions, the chamber's first response was a kind of embarrassed contempt. A cataloger accusing the conquerors, an archivist of corpses presuming to judge the hands that made them. The defense counsel's opening remarks did not even bother to address the witness directly. They addressed the chamber, as though the prosecutor were not worth speaking to, and they made the obvious point that a successful, lawful absorption is not a crime, and that the proceeding was an insult to officers who had given their lives to the Empire's peace. The witness for the dead let the contempt wash over it. I watched it stand in the pooled light at the center of the chamber, small and unluminous, and absorb the dismissal without flinching, and I remember thinking that it had the bearing of something that had already decided to lose everything and was therefore impossible to threaten. I did not yet know what it had found. I did not yet know that the cataloger of the dead had walked through the ruins of Earth, and found a thing that would turn the Empire's greatest victory into its deepest shame. When the defense finished, the witness spoke for the first time. It did not defend its rank or answer the contempt. It said only this: "I'm not here to accuse you of conquering. Conquering is what we are. I will not pretend it is a crime to be what we are. I am here because I walked through the world we conquered, and I catalogued what was left, and I found the truth of what we did, and the High Command knew that truth and buried it, and built a lie on top of it, and asked all of you to live inside the lie and call it peace. I am here to take the lie apart, exhibit by exhibit. And when I am finished, you will not be able to put it back together, and you will have to decide what kind of empire builds its peace on a buried truth. That is the only accusation I bring. The rest you will accuse yourselves of once you have seen what I have seen." The contempt in the chamber did not survive the first exhibit. By the last, there was no being in that vast room who would have met the witness's gaze. The witness began, strangely, in the middle. It began with the invasion itself, because it wanted the chamber to first remember the official story before it learned what the official story had omitted. Exhibit 4 was the High Command's own operational record of the 11-day campaign. The witness played it without commentary, and the chamber watched the war it thought it knew. The Concordance fleet had arrived at Earth in the standard formation of absorption: overwhelming, patient, designed less to destroy than to demonstrate. The doctrine was old and humane by the Concordance's lights. You did not need to kill a world into submission if you could simply show it that resistance was arithmetic suicide. So the fleet had revealed itself in the sky over Earth's cities, vast and serene, and it had broadcast the standard demand, and it had waited for the surrender that 400 worlds had given. Earth did not surrender on the first day. This was not unusual. Many worlds needed a demonstration first. So the Concordance gave the standard demonstration: a single, calibrated strike against a military installation, designed to show capability while minimizing loss, the merciful opening move of an empire that preferred absorption to slaughter. Earth's response, recorded in Exhibit 4, was the first thing that made the chamber stir. The humans had fought back. This itself was expected. Worlds often fought before they understood. What was not expected was how they fought, not with their militaries, or not only with them, but with everything. The operational record showed Concordance forces encountering resistance that did not behave like a planetary defense. It behaved like a planet. Improvised, decentralized, rising from everywhere at once, refusing to present the central command structure that Concordance doctrine was built to decapitate. The High Command's own log, in the flat voice of officers who did not yet understand what they were seeing, noted the difficulty. No central authority to compel. Resistance does not cease when leadership is eliminated. Population appears to be acting on individual initiative. It took 11 days. The Concordance won. There was never real doubt that it would win. The disparity in power was total. But it won at a cost that the operational record could not hide, and the High Command had buried. The absorption of Earth had cost more than the absorption of the previous 50 worlds combined. The humans had made the Concordance pay for every kilometer, not because they thought they could win, but for some reason the operational record could not supply, because reasons were not the business of an operational record. There were details in Exhibit 4 that the chamber did not understand on first viewing, and that only made sense later, after the final exhibit, when the whole shape of the thing was visible. The witness pointed them out anyway, planting them, so that when the revelation came, the chamber would remember it had seen the evidence all along. The humans had fought, the record showed, in a pattern that made no military sense, until you understood it was not military. They had fought hardest in places of no strategic value. They had defended, with desperate intensity, locations the Concordance analysts could not identify as targets at all: civilian districts, cultural sites, ordinary buildings that held nothing a conqueror would want. The analysts had logged this as irrational, as the disorganized flailing of a doomed population. But the witness asked the chamber to notice the timing. The fiercest human resistance had always come where the Concordance forces moved fastest, as though the humans were not defending those places because they mattered, but slowing the Concordance down wherever it threatened to move too quickly, to advance faster than some hidden schedule allowed. The humans had not been protecting territory. They had been managing the enemy's pace. Buying time, the record would later reveal, against a clock only they could see. And there was the matter of what the Concordance had not found. Exhibit 4 included the post-absorption inventory, the catalog of everything the Empire had captured when the war ended. And the inventory, read closely, was strange. The Concordance had expected to capture the accumulated substance of a civilization, its central archives, its genetic repositories, its great libraries, its seed banks, the irreplaceable cultural and biological treasure that every world hoards at its core. On 400 prior worlds, capturing this core had been the real prize of absorption, far more valuable than territory. On Earth, the core was missing. The libraries held copies, but not originals. The genetic repositories were present, but depleted, sampled, as though the most precious specimens had been removed. The seed banks were there, but incomplete. Everywhere the Concordance looked for the irreplaceable heart of the human world, it found instead a careful, convincing replica of a heart, with the actual organ quietly absent. The analysts had noted the discrepancies and filed them as the chaos of war, things lost, things destroyed, things misplaced in the confusion of conquest. The witness for the dead asked the chamber to hold that detail. The core was missing. It would matter, the witness promised, more than anything else in the record. Then it moved on, leaving the missing heart of Earth hanging in the chamber like a held breath. When Exhibit 4 ended, the chamber was uneasy but not yet broken. A hard conquest is still a conquest. The High Command's Defense Council rose and made exactly that point. The campaign was difficult, but it was lawful, it was successful, and difficulty is not a crime. The witness for the dead did not argue. It simply said, "The command believes this exhibit shows a war. I will now show the chamber what the war was about." And it called the next exhibit, which was numbered 1, because the witness had decided that the chamber must see the end of its certainty before it could understand the beginning. Exhibit 1 was small. It was so small that, when the witness placed it in the light at the center of the great chamber built for triumph, many in the high tiers could not at first see it at all. It was a human artifact, recovered from the ruins of a structure that Concordance analysts had identified as a place where human young were educated. It had survived the absorption by accident, the way small things survive, buried under the collapse of something larger. It was a flat-folded assembly of processed plant fiber, paper. The humans called it bound at one edge, its surface covered in the hand marks of a human child. The analysts had dated it. It had been made by a human approximately 9 years old, in the weeks before the invasion, as part of what the humans called a school project. The witness for the dead had it translated and read it into the record, and I will set it down here exactly as it was read, because it is the center of everything, and because the chamber that had absorbed 400 worlds without flinching began, as these words were read, to come apart. My project is about my planet. My teacher said to write about what makes Earth special, and I asked my mom, and she said the thing that makes Earth special is that it is the only place where there are people who love each other, that we know of. I said that can't be true. The universe is really big. My mom said okay, but it is the only place we know has love in it, so until we find another one we have to take care of this one extra carefully, because it might be the only one. So that is what makes Earth special. It is the place where love is. Maybe there is love in other places too, and that would be really good. But we have to take care of ours just in case it is the only one. The end. By a kid who loves his planet. The witness for the dead let the silence hold. Then it said, "The High Command is charged with the absorption of this world. I will now demonstrate that the High Command knew before the first strike that this world was not like the other 400, and that it absorbed it anyway, and that what it absorbed was not a military target. It was the place where love is. The Defense Council did not rise. For the first time in the tribunal, the Defense Council did not rise. To prove that the High Command knew, the witness reached for the beginning, the pre-invasion survey, the standard reconnaissance that the Concordance performed on every world before absorption. Exhibit 7 was that survey, recovered intact from command archives, and it was the document that turned the tribunal from a proceeding into a reckoning. Every absorption began with a survey. Its purpose was military and economic: assess defenses, catalog resources, identify the central authority to compel, estimate the cost of conquest. The survey of Earth had done all of this, but the survey teams, observing the humans for a full orbit of their star before the fleet arrived, had recorded more than defenses and resources. They had recorded the humans themselves. And buried in the technical appendices of Exhibit 7, beneath the weapons assessments and the resource maps, was a section the survey officers had not been required to write and had written anyway, because something about the humans had compelled them to. The witness read from it. The survey officers had observed, with the detached language of their profession, a pattern they could not fit into concordance models. They had observed that humans, individually weak and short-lived, organized their entire civilization around the protection of the vulnerable. That they spent enormous resources keeping alive members who could not contribute, the old, the sick, the broken. For no reason the survey could identify except that the humans appeared to consider these members valuable in themselves. That human young were raised not primarily to serve the society but to be loved by it, and that this love was treated by the humans as the actual point of the society's existence, with everything else, economy, technology, defense, understood as merely the means of protecting it. The survey officers had written a sentence that the witness read twice, slowly, into the silent chamber. This species has inverted the standard relationship. In the Concordance and in all 400 absorbed worlds, the individual exists to serve the civilization. In humans, the civilization exists to serve the love between individuals. We have no model for a people organized this way. We recommend the command be advised that the absorption of this world will not resemble the absorption of any prior world, because the thing being absorbed is not, in our assessment, a state. It is a family of 8 billion. The survey had been delivered to the High Command 19 days before the fleet arrived. The High Command had read it. Exhibit 7 included the access record. Every member of the High Command had opened the survey, including the appendix, including the sentence about the family of 8 billion. They had read it, and they had reviewed it, and the absorption order had gone out unchanged. The witness for the dead set down the survey and faced the High Command across the chamber and asked the question that the entire tribunal would turn upon. You were told. Before a single shot, you were told what this world was. Why did you not stop? And one member of the High Command, the only one who would speak in the entire proceeding, answered. And the answer was the thing the chamber had not been prepared for, the thing that made this a tragedy rather than simply a crime. The member of the High Command who answered was the officer who had commanded the invasion fleet directly. The record gives the human transliteration of his name as Varen. I will use it, because the witness used it, and because by the end, even the witness for the dead spoke his name without contempt. Exhibit 5 was Varen's own testimony, given not in his defense. He offered no defense, but as explanation, because he had decided, like the witness, that the truth was owed to the dead regardless of what it cost him. Varen did not deny reading the survey. He did not deny understanding it. What he told the chamber was worse than denial. He told the chamber that he had understood the survey completely, that he had read the sentence about the family of 8 billion and had grasped, immediately and fully, exactly what the concordance was about to do, and that he had given the order anyway, because the survey was the very reason the order could not be stopped. This is the part of the tribunal that I, the recorder, found hardest to set down, because it is where the simple story of evil dies and a more terrible story replaces it. Varen explained the logic of the concordance, the logic that had run for 10,000 years and absorbed 400 worlds. The concordance absorbed worlds not out of greed, originally, but out of fear, an ancient, foundational fear, written into its founding after some catastrophe so old that only fragments remained. The concordance had once been many separate peoples, and they had nearly destroyed each other, and out of that near destruction they had built a single overriding principle. No center of power may exist outside the concordance, because any independent center of power is a future war. Absorption was not conquest, in the concordance's own understanding. It was the prevention of war by the elimination of independence. Every free world was a potential enemy, therefore every world must be absorbed. Therefore the galaxy could only be safe when nothing in it was free. 10,000 years of this, 400 worlds, a peace built entirely on the principle that freedom itself was the disease. And then the survey of Earth had landed on Varen's desk, and he had read that this world was not organized around power at all, that it was organized around love, that its civilization existed to serve the bonds between its people. And Varen had understood with perfect clarity the thing that damned him. A world organized around love could never be absorbed, not really. You could conquer its territory, occupy its cities, fold its institutions into the machine, but the thing that made it itself, the love, the family of 8 billion, the inversion that put the bonds above the state, that could not be absorbed, because it did not live in the institutions the concordance knew how to absorb. It lived in the people, in each of them, in all of them, and a thing that lives in each of 8 billion people cannot be folded into a machine. It can only be broken, person by person, or it cannot be taken at all. I understood, Varen told the chamber, that we could not absorb Earth. We could only destroy what made it Earth and occupy the corpse. The survey did not warn me away from the invasion. The survey told me that the invasion, if it proceeded, would not be an absorption. It would be the first true extermination in our history, not of bodies, but of the thing the bodies carried. And I gave the order anyway. He was silent for a moment, because the alternative was to report to the concordance that there existed a world we could not absorb, a free center of love that would persist no matter what we did, and 10,000 years of doctrine could not survive that report. The concordance is built on the principle that everything can be absorbed. Earth proved the principle false, and so Earth could not be allowed to exist as itself, because its mere existence was the end of the only idea holding the concordance together. The witness for the dead asked Varen a question then, the only question it asked him, because it said, Varen was not the enemy. Varen was a man who had done a monstrous thing and knew it. And there is a difference between a monster and a man who became one, and the difference was worth establishing for the record. The witness asked, when did you understand what you had actually done, not the order, the thing underneath the order? When did you understand? And Varen told the chamber about the 11th day. He had been aboard the command ship, watching the final absorption, when the resistance on Earth simply stopped. Not surrendered, stopped. The humans who remained had fought to the last, and then there were no more of them, and the silence had fallen over the conquered world, and Varen had ordered the inventory of the captured core, the great prize, the accumulated soul of the world. And the inventory had come back wrong. Copies, not originals, depleted repositories, the convincing, empty heart. And Varen, standing on the bridge of his victorious flagship, had felt the first cold finger of understanding, that something was missing, that the prize was hollow, that he had spent 11 days and 1,000 ships conquering a thing whose center had been quietly removed. I told myself it was the chaos of war, Varen said. Things lost, things destroyed. I told myself that for 3 days. And then we intercepted the signal. He looked at the floor, and I understood that I had not conquered a world. I had been handled. A species I outgunned by 10,000 years had looked at me coming 2 years out and had calmly decided exactly how to lose to me, how to give me a war convincing enough that I would believe I had won, while they carried the only thing that mattered out the back door and into the dark. I was not the conqueror of Earth. I was the distraction. My entire magnificent invasion, the pride of the Concordance, was a thing the humans arranged for me to be busy with while they saved their children. I have commanded the absorption of 40 worlds. And the only world that ever truly defeated me did it by letting me win. He was quiet for a long moment, and then he said the thing that the witness for the dead later told me was the reason it did not hate him. There was a moment when I understood, when I held the intercepted signal and finally grasped that the children were gone, that the love was already light years away, that I had conquered an empty house. There was a moment when I felt something I had never felt in 40 absorptions. I felt glad. He looked up at the chamber, and there was something broken and clean in his face. For one moment, before the officer in me took over, before I gave the order to bury the signal, for one moment I was glad they got away. I, the hand of the Empire, the conqueror of Earth, stood on my flagship and felt my whole heart lift because the family had escaped me. And then I crushed that feeling and did my duty and buried the truth and built the lie. But I felt it. For one moment I was on their side, against myself, against everything I am. That is the thing I cannot forgive myself for. Not the order. The order I gave because I was what the Concordance made me. But that one moment of gladness, that was me, the real me, the one underneath the Empire, and I killed him too, along with everything else on that world. I had a chance to be the thing the humans were, and I chose to be the Empire instead. Condemn the Empire if you want. But I condemn myself, because for one moment I knew better, and I did it anyway. The chamber understood then what it was sitting inside of. Not a crime of malice. A crime of system, an empire that had to destroy the one world that proved its founding fear was a lie, precisely because it proved it. And a man who had felt, for one moment, the pull of the thing the humans were, and had chosen the machine over his own lifted heart. But the witness for the dead was not finished, because Varen's testimony, terrible as it was, still described an absorption, a conquest of the real Earth, however doomed. And the witness for the dead had brought the chamber here to reveal that even this was not what had happened. There was one more layer, the witness called Exhibit 2. Before the signal, though, before Exhibit 2 and its revelation, the witness inserted one more piece, out of sequence, numbered 8 because it had been the last thing the witness recovered, and the last thing it could bear to read. It was a collection of personal logs, recovered from the ruins, made by the humans who had stayed behind to fight the decoy war. These were not soldiers' logs, most of them. They were the private recordings of ordinary people in their final days, and the witness read only 3, because, it told the chamber, 3 was as many as it could read aloud without stopping, and it would not let itself stop in front of the high command. The first was a woman who had been, in the human profession, a teacher. The witness believed she had taught at the very school where the child's project was found. Her log was made on what the timestamp showed was the 2nd day of the invasion. The buses left 2 years ago. That's how I think of it, the buses. We put the children on the ark in waves, quietly over months, and told the world they'd gone to relatives, gone abroad, gone anywhere. We couldn't tell anyone the truth, that they were going to the stars, that they were the part of us that gets to live. The ones of us who stayed, we drew lots, some places. Other places we just volunteered, because somebody had to stay and make it look like a full world, a fighting world, a world worth conquering. If they'd arrived and found the cities half empty, they'd have known. They'd have started looking up, looking out, looking for where everyone went. So we stayed to be the crowd, to be the lights in the windows, to be the resistance fierce enough that they'd never think to count us and notice how few we really are. I keep a photograph of my students, the ones I put on the buses. They're out there now, somewhere I'll never see, and they're alive, and some of them will grow up and become teachers themselves and stand in front of children of their own, and that is the most beautiful thought I have ever had, and I am going to die with it, and that is all right. That is completely all right. I taught them what Earth was. Now they get to be it somewhere else. The end. By a teacher who loves her students. The witness paused after reading the last line, because it echoed the child's project, the end. By a kid who loves his planet, and the echo was not an accident. The witness told the chamber it believed the child had learned that small closing formula from this very teacher, and had copied it into his project, and that the teacher had then stayed behind to die in the same city where the child she taught also stayed behind to die, both of them part of the crowd, the lights in the windows, the convincing decoy. The second log was a man who had been an engineer, one of the ones who built the false core, the replica libraries, the depleted but convincing repositories, the empty heart that would fool the conquerors. My job was to make the fake look real, to build a heart of Earth so convincing they'd capture it and stop looking for the real one. I spent 18 months building a beautiful lie copies that look like originals, archives full of everything except the things that actually matter, a whole counterfeit soul for them to carry home in triumph. It's the best work I've ever done. Nobody will ever know I did it. They'll capture my fake and think they have us, and they'll never understand that the realest thing I ever made was a forgery, and that I made it so that the true thing could get away. There's a kind of pride in that I can't explain. I built the empty house so well that the monsters will move in and never notice the family's gone. That's my whole life's work. An empty house. The most important empty house in history. The third log the witness read was the shortest. It was a child, not the child of Exhibit 1, a different one, younger, recorded by a parent who was clearly prompting the small voice through what everyone knew were final days. The witness read it in a voice that, for the first time, was not steady. Mommy says we're staying so the other kids can be safe. I asked if I could go on the ship too, and she said no, the ship is full, and somebody has to stay and be brave so the bad guys don't know the ship left. I said I don't want to be brave. She said I know, baby, nobody wants to, that's what makes it brave. So I'm going to stay and be brave even though I don't want to, and the other kids get to grow up. My mommy says that means I'm a hero even though I'm scared. I'm really scared. But the other kids get to grow up, so okay. The witness for the dead set down the logs. The chamber was utterly silent. These are the ones the high command called absorbed, the witness said quietly. These are the casualties the operational record logged as the cost of a successful conquest. A teacher who put her students on the ark and stayed to be a light in a window. An engineer who built the empty house so well the monsters never noticed. A child who did not want to be brave and was brave anyway, so that other children he would never meet, could grow up. The command did not absorb these people. These people defeated the command and died doing it, and the command stole even the knowledge of their victory and called them the routine cost of a routine conquest. The witness looked at the high command. I am going to give them back their victory now. This is Exhibit 2. Exhibit 2 was a recording of a transmission. The Concordance had intercepted it on the third day of the invasion, and the High Command had classified it at the highest level, and it had never been seen outside a circle of 4 officers until the witness for the dead, the defector, carried it out. The transmission was human. It was directed not at the Concordance but outward, away from Earth, into the deep dark, on a frequency, and in a format that suggested it was meant to be received somewhere very far away, by someone the humans had arranged to be listening. It had been sent on the third day, early in the invasion, when the humans already understood they could not win, but before the end. The witness played it. It was a human voice, an adult, steady but carrying something underneath the steadiness that the chamber had learned, by now, to to recognize as the human refusal to let fear hold the wheel. This is Earth. If you're receiving this, then it worked, and we got the signal out before they closed the sky. I don't have long, so I'll keep it simple. They came to take us. They're stronger than us by so much it isn't even a fight, it's a demonstration. We're not going to win this. We knew we probably wouldn't when we made the plan. So we didn't make a plan to win. We made a plan to make sure they didn't get what they came for. You have the Ark, you have the children, and the libraries, and the seeds, and the recordings of everything we are, every song, every story, every stupid joke, every way we've ever found to tell each other I love you. You've had it for 2 years since we first saw them coming and understood what they were. It's out there now in the dark, going somewhere they'll never look, carrying the actual thing, carrying the love. That's the part that matters. That's the part we sent away to be safe. What they're invading down here, what they're going to spend 11 days and 1,000 ships conquering, it's the shell. It's the empty house after the family's already gone. We stayed behind, the ones of us who stayed, to make it look real. To fight hard enough that they'd believe they were taking the whole thing. To keep their eyes down here on us, on the decoy, while the real Earth, the part that's actually Earth, gets further and further away. They think they're conquering a planet. They're conquering a stage set. And every hour we make them fight for it is another hour the Ark is safe, another light year between them and the children. So if you're receiving this, we did it. We're about to die, all of us who stayed, and we did it on purpose and it worked. Don't come back for us. There's nothing here to come back for anymore. We made sure of that. We sent everything that mattered to you. Just keep going. Keep the love alive somewhere they can't reach. Raise the children to know that Earth was real, that it was the place where love was, and that when the monsters came for it, it picked up the most precious thing it had and threw it as far into the dark as it could, and then turned around and spent its own life buying time for the throw. Take care of our hours. It might be the only one. Earth signing off. We were the place where love was. We still are. We just live somewhere else now. The recording ended. And the chamber that had been built for triumph, the chamber that had absorbed 400 worlds, the chamber full of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, sat in a silence so total and so long that I, the recorder, stopped writing, because there was nothing happening that could be written, only a vast room full of beings discovering, all at once, what they had actually done. They had not conquered Earth. Earth had seen them coming 2 years out. Earth had understood it could not win. And Earth had done the most human thing in the long human record. It had taken the one thing that mattered, its children, its love, the actual irreplaceable substance of itself. And it had hidden that thing in the dark where the Empire would never find it. And then it had built a decoy of its own dying body and fought to the last to make the decoy convincing, so that the Empire would spend its fury conquering an empty house while the family escaped out the back. The 11-day war that had cost more than 50 absorptions combined had not been a defense. It had been a performance. A deliberate, sacrificial performance, staged by people who knew they were already dead, designed to hold the enemy's gaze long enough for the throw to land. The humans had not been trying to win. They had been trying to be convincing. And they had been convincing enough that the high command of the Galactic Concordance had genuinely believed, for the entire war and for years after, that it had absorbed the world. It had absorbed the shell. The family was gone. The love was somewhere in the dark, getting further away every hour, exactly as planned. It was at this point that the witness for the dead did the thing that no one in the chamber had anticipated. It revealed why it had defected, why a Concordance officer had turned against its own empire and brought these exhibits into the light. Exhibit 3 was the witness's own confession. The witness for the dead had been one of the 4 officers who intercepted the signal on the 3rd day. It had been there when the High Command realized in private what the human transmission meant, that the war they were fighting was for an empty stage, that the real Earth had already escaped, that the whole conquest was a humiliation the Concordance could never admit. And it had watched the High Command make its choice, to bury the signal, to complete the conquest of the decoy, and to announce to the Concordance that Earth had been absorbed like any other world. To let 10,000 years of doctrine stand on a lie, because the truth, there exists a thing we cannot absorb, and it slipped through our fingers, and it is out there still, would have ended the Empire's founding certainty more surely than any war. The witness had helped bury it. For years, the witness had carried the knowledge that the Concordance's greatest conquest was its greatest defeat, dressed up as a victory, and that somewhere in the dark the actual Earth was still alive, still carrying its children and its love toward a horizon the Empire would never reach. And what had broken the witness, finally, was Exhibit 1, the child's school project. The witness had been the officer assigned to catalog the recovered artifacts of the dead decoy world, and it had found the small folded paper, and it had read a 9-year-old's explanation of what made Earth special, and it had understood that the child who wrote it was almost certainly one of the ones who stayed behind, one of the ones sacrificed to make the decoy convincing, while other children, the saved ones, rode the ark into the dark. I read a dead child's words about love, the witness told the chamber, and I understood that this child had been left behind to die so that other children could live, and that the child probably knew it, because the humans told their young the truth, and that somewhere out in the dark there is a human child the same age who survived because this one did not, and who is being raised, right now, to know that Earth was real, and that it was the place where love was. And I understood that my empire had not merely killed this child. It had killed this child and then lied and called the killing a victory, and built the lie into the foundation of everything, so that the child would not even be remembered as what it was, not a casualty of conquest, but a soldier in the most successful defensive operation in the history of the galaxy. They didn't just take this child's life. They took the meaning of its death, and I could not carry that anymore. The witness for the dead had defected to give the dead child back the meaning of its death. That was the whole of its motive. Not justice for itself, not power, not even mercy for the living. Only this, that the ones who stayed behind to throw the love into the dark should be remembered as what they were, and not as a footnote in a lie. The recorder breaking. I must interrupt the exhibits to record something about myself, because the tribunal's account would be incomplete without it, and because I promised the witness for the dead that I would keep an honest record, and an honest record includes the recorder. I told you at the beginning that recorders are instruments, and that we are not supposed to be changed. I want to describe the moment I stopped being an instrument, because it was not the child's project, and it was not the signal, and it was not even the logs of the ones who stayed. It was a smaller thing, and it happened to me alone in the archive after a day of the tribunal, when I went to verify the exhibits against the original recovered materials, as my function required. I held the child's school project. The actual object, not the translation, not the recording, the thing itself, the folded paper, the hand marks of a 9-year-old who had been dead for years. My function was to confirm its authenticity and file the confirmation. That is all. That is what an instrument does. And I found on the back of the last page something the translation had not included because it was not part of the project. It was a small drawing made by the same child's hand in the corner, the way children decorate the margins of their work. It was a drawing of the Earth, a simple round shape, blue and green, the way the child must have seen it in pictures. And around the Earth the child had drawn a pair of hands, holding it, cupping it gently, the way you hold something small and precious that you are afraid of dropping. And under the hands, in the child's careful letters, were 3 words that the project did not need, and the child had written anyway, because the child meant them. Please be careful. I do not know who the child was addressing. Perhaps the reader of the project. Perhaps the universe. Perhaps, without knowing it, the thing that was already coming, the Empire 2 years away, the ships that would fill the sky. Please be careful. A 9-year-old drawing hands around the world, asking whatever was out there to be gentle with the only place we know that has love in it. And I, the recorder, the instrument, the neutral keeper of the tribunal of the empire that had filled that child's sky with ships and conquered the empty house where the child stayed behind to die. I sat alone in the archive holding that small folded paper, and I wept. I had never wept. My function does not include weeping. But I held a dead child's drawing of careful hands around the world, and the 3 words, "Please be careful," and I understood that my empire had received that request, that the survey had carried the substance of it to the High Command 19 days before the invasion, that we had been asked, in effect, to be careful with the place where love is, and that we had read the request and filled the sky with ships anyway. The child asked us to be careful. We were not careful. We were the opposite of careful. We were the thing the child's mother had been warning about when she said we have to take care of ours just in case it is the only one. Because we were the proof that the universe contains things that are not careful, that fill skies with ships, that conquer empty houses and call it peace. That is when I stopped being an instrument, holding "Please be careful" in a dead child's hand. I have not been an instrument since. I do not expect to be one again. The witness for the dead was right. No one who truly understands what we did can go back to being what they were before they understood it. Exhibit 6. What the Empire Decided. I come now to the hardest part of the record to keep, because it is the part where the chamber had to decide what to do with the truth, and what it decided is not simple, and I have resolved to set it down without softening it, because the witness for the dead would accept nothing less. The High Command was found guilty. That much the chamber agreed on quickly. Varen and the others were condemned, not for losing, not even for conquering, but for the burying, for the lie, for stealing the meaning of the dead. Varen accepted the judgment without appeal. His last statement to the chamber was brief. "I gave the order because the truth would have ended the concordance. I see now that the concordance deserved to end, and that I should have let it, and that the humans understood in 2 years what I refused to understand in a lifetime, that some things are worth more than the system that protects you. They knew what was worth saving. I saved the system instead. Condemn me. I would condemn me." But the harder question was not the guilt of the command. The harder question was what the concordance would do now that it knew. Because the truth Exhibit 2 had revealed was not only that the High Command had lied, it was that the concordance's entire founding principle was false. The humans had proven, beyond any argument, that there existed a thing that could not be absorbed, a free center of love that had slipped through the Empire's total power and survived. The fear at the root of the concordance: no independent thing can be allowed to exist, because independence is war, had been disproven by a planet that chose, instead of war, to simply leave, and to throw its most precious thing beyond the Empire's reach rather than fight to keep it. The concordance could respond to this in one of 2 ways. It could hunt. It could turn its vast power outward and search the dark for the Ark, for the real Earth, for the escaped family, and try to finish the absorption it had failed, try to prove its founding principle true by force, by finally catching and breaking the one thing that had escaped. Or it could let them go. The debate was long, and I will not record all of it, but I will record its shape because the shape mattered. There was a faction large and not evil and afraid that argued for the hunt. Their argument was not cruelty. Their argument was the oldest fear of the concordance, the founding fear, the thing the Empire had been built to answer. An independent power that escaped us is a future war. If the real Earth survived out there in the dark, growing, remembering what was done to it, then someday it would return stronger, and it would not come to make a decoy and slip away. It would come for vengeance. The only safety, this faction argued, was the old safety. Find them, absorb them, finish what was started. They did not want to. Several of them wept as they argued for it. But they had lived their whole lives inside the founding fear, and the fear told them that mercy now was war later, and they could not unlearn it in an afternoon. Against them stood the witness for the dead, and a growing number who had been changed by the exhibits, and their argument was harder to make, because it offered no safety at all. They argued that the founding fear was precisely the thing Earth had disproven. Earth had escaped, yes, and Earth had not come back for vengeance. Earth had sent a signal that said, don't come back for us, just keep going, keep the love alive somewhere they can't reach. A vengeful power does not flee and hide its children. A vengeful power stays and fights and plots return. Earth had done the opposite. Earth had asked only to be left alone, to be allowed to exist somewhere the Empire could not reach, to take care of its own. The founding fear said independence is war. Earth was the living proof that independence could be the refusal of war, that a free people, given the choice between vengeance and their children, would choose their children and ask for nothing but distance. To hunt them, the witness argued, would not be to prevent a future war. It would be to create one, to take a people who wanted only to be left alone and chase them across the dark until they had no choice but to fight. The founding fear was self-fulfilling. It made enemies by hunting friends. 10,000 years of absorption had been the Empire manufacturing the very threat it feared, by refusing to allow the existence of anything it had not conquered. Earth was the chance to break the cycle, to let one free thing remain free, and to discover that the galaxy did not end, that the founding fear was a lie, that you could let love escape into the dark and simply let it go and be no less safe for it. The faction of fear was not defeated by argument. It was defeated by the child's project, read one final time. The witness for the dead requested it, and the chamber permitted it, and the small words about love being the thing that made Earth special were read into the great chamber built for triumph one last time. And this time the recorder was asked to read it, because the witness said the record itself should speak, and I read it, no longer an instrument, with the 3 words "please be careful" held in my mind though they were not part of the text. And when I finished, there was no one left in the faction of fear who could meet the chamber's eyes. Because the choice had become clear, and it was not a choice about safety. It was a choice about what the Concordance wanted to be. It could be the Empire that hunted a child's love across the dark to extinguish it, in the name of a fear that the child's own people had already disproven. Or it could be, for the first time in 10,000 years, something else, something that could look at a free thing it did not control and choose, against all its history, to let it live. And when the words were finished, the eldest member of the Concordance, not of the condemned command, but of the governing body itself, rose and spoke the decision. And the decision was this. For 10,000 years we have believed that anything free is a future war, and so we have made the galaxy safe by making it unfree, and we called that peace. A world of 8 billion looked at our total power and did not make war on us. It made a decoy of its own body so that its children could go free, and it asked nothing of us except that we not be told, because it did not even trust us with the knowledge of where its love had gone. It was right not to trust us. We would have hunted it. We are the kind of thing that hunts free love through the dark and calls the hunting piece. The humans saw that about us more clearly than we have ever seen it about ourselves. The elder was silent for a long moment. We will not hunt them. Let the record show that the Concordance, having conquered the empty house, chooses not to pursue the family. Not out of mercy, we have no right to call it mercy, after what we did to the ones who stayed. Out of shame. Out of the understanding that the only decent thing left for us to do, the only act that might begin to mean something, is to let the one free thing that ever escaped us remain free. Let them go. Let the children grow up somewhere we will never reach. Let Earth be, out there in the dark, the place where love is. We forfeited our claim to it the moment we read the survey and gave the order anyway. The least we can do, the only thing we can do, is never, ever, look for them again. And so the Galactic Concordance, the empire that had absorbed 400 worlds and never once let anything go free, made the first and only exception in its 10,000-year history. It let Earth escape. It chose, formally, to stop looking. It turned its vast, all-seeing power deliberately away from a single corner of the dark, and it kept it turned away, so that the family of 8 billion, or what was left of them, the saved ones, the children on the ark, could grow old and have children of their own in a place no empire would ever find. After the last exhibit, the tribunal ended. The command was condemned. The record was sealed and then, at the insistence of the witness for the dead, unsealed, made public across the whole concordance, so that every being in the empire would know what had been done in the name of their peace, and what had escaped, and why it had been allowed to go. But there was one more exhibit, and the witness for the dead saved it for after the verdict, because it was not evidence against the command. It was evidence for the future, the one piece of the human record that pointed forward instead of back, and the witness wanted it to be the last thing the concordance heard, so that the empire would carry it forward into whatever it chose to become. Exhibit 9, the message that was not for U.S. Among the recovered transmissions, the witness had found one more, and this one, unlike the signal of Exhibit 2, had not been directed outward to the ark. It had been left behind deliberately, on Earth, in a format the humans would have known the concordance might eventually decode. It was a message the dying decoy world had written to the conquerors. To us, the witness believed it had been composed in the final days by the ones who stayed, knowing that someday, perhaps, the empire that conquered the empty house would understand what it had really done, and would go looking through the ruins, and would find these words waiting. The witness read it last of all. To whoever finally understands what happened here, and someone will, eventually, because the truth is patient and lies get tired. By the time you read this, you'll know. You'll know you didn't conquer us. You'll know the war you won was a door we held shut with our bodies while the people we love climbed out the window. You'll know the children are gone, the libraries are gone, the love is gone, out into a dark you'll never have the patience to search. And you'll feel however you feel about that. Cheated, maybe, or ashamed, or, and this is the one we're hoping for, maybe a little bit glad, the way even a hunter can be glad when the thing it hunts is beautiful enough and gets away. We're not writing this to gloat. We lost everything. Every one of us who stayed is dead by the time you read this, and we died scared because we were ordinary people and dying is frightening and we did not enjoy it. We're not heroes in a story. We're a teacher and an engineer and a kid who didn't want to be brave. We're writing this because we want you to know one thing, and we want you to carry it, because you're going to outlive us and we need somebody to carry it. You could have been us. That's the whole message. You came here with 10,000 years and 1,000 ships and the power to erase a world, and you used it to take an empty house, because somewhere back at your beginning you got so afraid of each other that you decided nothing could be allowed to be free. We were afraid too. We were just as small and scared as you, but we made a different choice at our beginning. We decided that the love between us was the point, and that everything else, the power, the ships, the empire, was just the house you build to keep the love safe. You built a house and forgot to put any love in it. We filled ours so full of love that when the house burned down, the love just got up and walked out and kept going. You could have been us. It's not too late for you to be us. The love isn't a human thing we checked, we hoped, we always hoped there was love in other places too. It's a choice thing. Any people can make it, even you, even now. You can put down the fear you started with and decide that the bonds between you matter more than the control over each other. You can become the kind of empire that builds houses to hold love instead of houses to hold territory. We can't make you. We're dead. But we can leave you the choice here in the ruins of the house you conquered, where maybe, finally, you're ready to hear it. Take care of yours. We took care of ours. It might be the only one, but we hope, we really hope that it isn't. We hope there's love in 1,000 places. We hope someday there's love in you. Earth, to the empire that conquered our empty house, we forgive you, not because you deserve it, because carrying our forgiveness might be the thing that finally makes you put down the fear. Now go and be better than you were. That's the only revenge we want. The witness for the dead finished reading and set the transmission down, and the great chamber built for triumph held the longest silence of the entire tribunal, longer than the silence after the signal, longer than the silence after the child's project. Because this silence was not shock. It was the silence of an empire being offered, by the very world it had murdered, a way to stop being what it was. We forgive you. Now go and be better. The dead decoy world had reached up out of the ruins and handed its conqueror the one thing the conqueror could not take by force, the chance to change. The witness departs. The witness for the dead did not stay to see what the empire would do with the chance. Its work was done. The lie was taken apart. The dead had been given back the meaning of their deaths. The choice had been laid before the concordance in the dead world's own forgiving words. There was nothing left for a cataloger of the dead to do in a chamber that had finally learned to see them. Before it left, it came to me, to the recorder, the one it had asked to keep the honest account. It did not say much. It was not a being of many words. That was perhaps why it had let the exhibit speak. But it told me one thing that I have kept, and that I will set down here as the last words of any living participant in the record. It said, I spent my life cataloging what we destroyed, 400 worlds of it. I wrote down the dead and filed them and felt nothing because that was my function and I was an instrument. And then I walked through Earth and I found a child's drawing of careful hands around the world, and I stopped being an instrument, the same way you did. It looked at me with whatever the concordance has in place of eyes. Here is the thing I learned that I want the record to end on. The humans did not defeat us with their war. They defeated us with their catalog, with the small things, the school project, the teacher's photograph, the engineer's pride in his empty house, the child who didn't want to be brave. We thought we were the ones who kept the records of the conquered, but the humans kept a better record, a record of love, and they sent it into the dark where we could never burn it, and they left a copy in the ruins for us to find, and the record they kept defeated the empire that cataloged 400 worlds. The small things won. They always win in the end. We just never lived long enough as an empire to find it out. Maybe now we will. And then the witness for the dead went out of the chamber and out of the record, and I do not know where it went. I like to think it went looking, not for the ark, never for the ark, but for the thing the ark carried, for love in the places it might be found, for the proof the humans died hoping for, that theirs was not the only one. I have kept this account because I am the recorder, and because the witness for the dead asked one thing of me before it left the chamber for the last time. It asked me to make sure the child was remembered, not the war, not the command, not even the great decision to stop hunting. The child. The 9-year-old who wrote about love being the thing that made Earth special, and who was left behind to die so that another child could live, and who, the witness believed, and I believe, almost certainly understood, and stayed anyway, because the humans told their young the truth, and the young, given the truth, chose like their parents to throw the love into the dark and turn around and buy time for the throw. So I will end the record where the witness for the dead would want it ended, not with the empire, not with the trial, with the small folded paper recovered from the ruins of a school, written in a child's hand in the weeks before the sky filled with ships. It is the place where love is. Maybe there is love in other places too, and that would be really good. But we have to take care of ours just in case it is the only one. They took care of theirs. They took the most precious thing they had and threw it as far into the dark as a dying world could throw, and they spent their own lives, every one of the ones who stayed, making sure the throw landed. The empire conquered the shell and never knew for years that the house was empty. And somewhere out in the dark, beyond the reach of any power that would ever think to look, there are human children growing up who know that Earth was real, that it was the place where love was, and that it still is, that it just lives somewhere else now. The Concordance sat in silent shock after the revelation. I was there. I recorded the silence, but the silence was not the end of the story, and the empire was not the point of it. The point of it rode the Ark into the dark 2 years before the first ship arrived, carrying the children and the libraries and the seeds and the recordings of every way a human being ever found to say "I love you." And it is out there still, getting further away, exactly as planned, taking care of theirs. Just in case it is the only one.